Okay, so we are in 12th Sunday after Pentecost, and today's text is Isaiah 51, 1 through 6, that actually we will hear during worship service. But, so the thing is, with the text, why and how that text was chosen for as a pair for the gospel reading, and the gospel reading is a very famous one. I usually do not, make those comments, but it's Matthew 16, 13 to 19, where Peter makes his confession of faith. You are the Christ, the Son of God, the living one. And then as a response, Jesus says, you are Peter, okay? And we need to know that Peter means the rock, okay? Or sometimes it is translated more like a, I don't know, what I would even translate like a boulder or a huge cliff, like a rocky mountain. And on the rock, and then then Jesus uses another word. We'll talk about this, I'll talk about this during my sermon. So he plays with that. The idea is why I think that parallel text is chosen, that in verse 1 in Isaiah 51, look to the rock from which you were hewn. Okay? So probably this idea of connecting or be made out of rock. Okay, this rock, and we'll talk about this rock. What is that? What's the concept behind it? So probably that's the connection between two of these texts. So we need to understand that Isaiah 51 has a very important theme. The theme of righteousness. It starts and it ends with that. Our passage starts and ends, but it also actually goes further, so the whole block can go to different verses. So see, listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, and then in verse 5, my righteousness draws near, and in verse 6, by the very end, my salvation will be forever, my righteousness will never be dismayed. And what we see here, and what sometimes puzzles our Lutheran brains. The reason why I make sure that we have a stress on Lutheran brain is we were taught in our dogmatical books are full of that, and that's truly so, that whenever we see word righteousness, most likely we need to take it as the righteousness which is given to us, okay? Which is given to us by God because He accomplished everything, and that's truly so. We cannot obtain righteousness on our own. That's not even an argument. I mean, I'm not going to go there. But what sometimes we forget is when we are given righteousness, okay, let me finish. When we are given righteousness, it is good actually to pursue righteousness. Okay? So in our confessional books, we do have a statement about so-called third use of the law. Okay? So when we are justified, when we are in the church, it is great to use the law, the statements that give us a direction of life as a development. So when we seek for fulfilling the righteousness, it's not because we want to reconnect with God or establish relationship based on our merit. Okay? It's vice versa. We are in relationship with God, and therefore we want to please Him. We want to be obedient children. So if parents tell you you have to pluck the duck, you just don't argue. You just pluck the duck. Okay? I know that reference would make no sense for those who will watch watch it on YouTube, but we know the context. Okay? So that's kind of the stuff. Or let me do it this way. When we are, I know it's not gracious thing, not received by grace. We actually pass the test. We get our driver license, and I have one of those. Okay, really good one. Real ID now it's called. Okay, so I can fly goodness knows where now within the United States. You've heard about real ID, yeah? Okay, so when you get, let's say you are given real ID, okay? You have this real ID. Now, your third use of the law will be just, to obey whatever signs you see. So if the speed limit is 65, you go 65. I mean, I know none of us go 65, but, okay? If it says don't turn, don't turn right on the red, I don't, and so on and so forth. So we have this. So I believe when Isaiah, or when God through Isaiah, let's go to the text, tells, listen to me, those who pursue righteousness. It's not the ones who are trying to be self-righteous. It's not about them. It's about those who are, what I would say, when you talk about, superheroes and stuff, there are good guys, there are bad guys, okay? That's the good guys. It's those who try to maintain their relationship with God. And actually, the thing is, the whole block, starting with chapter 49, 49 to 55, is kind of response to what was promised before. And the promise before is, you guys are failing. You failing really badly. You're failing so bad that you will end up in another wilderness. Or he turns it into more exile experience. Yet, those who, as we have in the book of Habakkuk, those who want to pursue righteousness, they shall live by faith. They shall live by expectation that the Lord is good. So those of you who, even through exile experience, believe that God did it for the good cause, so you guys listen to me. And that's what he has to say. So what he says to them is, two things. First of all, you who pursue righteousness and you who seek the Lord. Okay? So it's together. It's a parallel. We have many parallels in this text, in this story, or in this text, yeah. Those who pursue righteousness and those who seek the Lord. Let's jump for 1 second into verse 5. My righteousness draws near, my salvation has gone out. Okay? 6. My salvation will be forever, my righteousness will never be dismayed. Okay, so we have those important pairs that bring this idea together. So those of them who are in connection with the Lord, who are looking for the ways to please him, again, not to become the children of God, but actually because you are children of God, and he will stress it in the second verse when he talks about Abraham and Sarah. So those of you look for, now, second part of verse 1, look to the rock from which you were hewn and to quarry from which you were dug. Okay? There are two things about that. Many things that can be said about that, but at least two I need to mention here. One of them is there is a whole theme in the Bible about the rock. And there are two different, that's the problem with translation of biblical text. Not only in this particular place, but it's a challenge. So those who do translate Word of God into other languages are doing tremendous and important work. And if we can support Lutheran Bible translators, maybe we should. Because the problem is, you have words in Hebrew, we are in Old Testament, or if we talk about New Testament, we have words in Greek. And the thing is, let me just for fun. So the word rock here is called Tsur, T-Z-U-R, okay, Tsur, it's a rock. There is another one, Eben. These words, Hebrew words, are not related whatsoever. But guess what? Eben is also translated by the word rock. And we just do not really have a term. I mean, maybe theoretically they should have used boulder for that, or not. I don't know. See, I'm neither into translation as a business or into geology, because geology is not a science. Just kidding. That's apparently you guys watched The Big Bang Theory, okay? So that makes perfect sense. So what happens is the problem is when you look in concordance, what you find is all the verses with a rock. The thing is, the problem is that behind them there are two sets of Bible passages. Those who contain this word and those who contain this word, okay? And there is a slight difference. There is a slight diversity in meaning, let's put it this way. We are not going to talk about this like in depth, but one of the main thing is, and I will show you, this word, sur, is very prominent and dominant in Deuteronomy, come on, Deuteronomy 32, one of the songs of Moses. And in description box, if I will forget, please remind me that we need to have we have a Bible study based on Deuteronomy 32, actually. And as far as I believe, that it's a long song of Moses, but the main thing is actually, I talked about the rock over there in the song. So that's the rock that's basically God is presented as the rock, the one who is creating and defending. Okay, that's the one who provides. And unlike other rocky things, like idols can be made out of rock, unlike them, our God is the real one who is a living rock, and and so on and so forth. So in letter to Hebrews, most likely that's what they are picked up on this theme. Okay, on this theme. There is another story that we need to get from the second part of verse 1. However you translate it, you have let's make it a little bit greenish to make a separation. That's your soil level, okay? And your rock, usually, however it is, sticks up, okay? Goes up. That's your miniature mountain or some kind of thing which is above the level, okay? But the quarry from which you were dug goes here, okay? So what it tells us actually is very interesting. The Israelites are made from something above and from something below. Okay, so we have like in a sense, 3 level of environment. A little bit above, we have even though surface is not mentioned, and we have a little bit below. Okay, so what it tells us is, I know it might sound strange, but every one of us is, on one hand, we belong to a community. We all the same in a sense, and we will see it in verse 2. Look to the Abraham your father, and look to the Sarah who bare you. Okay, so we are from one family. But there is particular distinctive feature to every one of us. Because, being taken from the rock, we can be, one of us is taken from here. And another one is from here. And somebody was from here, from here. So I know it's kind of symbolic thing, but what I mean is, God, through His Word, tells us that, again, one more time, everyone is a unique. Okay? though we are combined into one fellowship, into one unity, into one congregation, into one, I love that word even better, into one family. Okay? With very distinctive features, and we need to learn how to, appreciate them and use them for seeking the righteousness and pursuing the righteousness and seeking the Lord. Okay? Now, there are commentaries that I've read while I was going through the passage. Interesting. What they try to do is look to the rock from which you were hewn and to the quarry from which you were dug, and then let's say, okay, in the ancient text, there are no chapter breaks or verse breaks. You do know that, okay? If you will have ever a chance to go either to museum or maybe to local synagogue and see the scroll, how it looks like, you will see distinctive books. The scroll of Torah, the 5 books of Moses, you will not see 5 scrolls. You will see one huge scroll about this much in diameter. But you still see that this is Genesis, what they call Bereshit, this is Exodus, Shmot, this is Leviticus, Vayikra, and then here is Numbers, which is Bamidbar, and this is Dvarim, which is, Deuteronomy. But so there are distinctive books, but there are basically no chapter breaks and definitely no verse breaks. So look to the Abraham your father, and then look to the rock from which you were hewn. Look to the Abraham and to the Sarah who bore you. So some commentators say when we see this parallel, Luke 2:1-2, Luke 2:1-2. Okay? So we have a phrase, Luke 2, and then instead of say 1-2, hopefully lesser confusion, A and B, and then it repeats, Luke 2, and then another A and B. So what they try to say is these A and B are parallel. These A and B are not a substitution, but kind of like the thing that picks up. So rock and quarry is an earthly symbol for Abram and Sarah. And okay, I can see that. Because sometimes fathers are tough as a rock, and it is mother who carries a child within, and then the child is taken out of her, kind of like, I don't want to say dug out of her, but there are some similarities with that, okay? Why are you laughing? Okay.
It's the picture.
Yeah. See, through many years, at least my years, not many. Then if it's my years, it's not so many. So through some of my years of Bible studies, I've been taught that we need to understand, we need to know everything about justification, sanctification. We need to know about, God as triune God, angels, and the impact of baptism and impact of Holy Communion. And all of this is great and important. But sometimes by no means I want to decline or drop it, but we need to read the Bible, in a sense, as it is, which makes very close connection of humans with nature, knowing how our bodies look like, how do we function. Because the stretched arm of God, okay, what does that mean? If we have no clue what the arm is, we don't really have any, it becomes so theoretical, it's become so detached from the real world that sometimes we lose the meaning. So it is interesting to see these parallels between the rock and the quarry and Abraham and Sarah, which is here. But one more time. Let us now jump into Deuteronomy 32 one more time. Not one more time, just for now. And we will start, we'll not go through the whole chapter, but I will show you a couple places, and then you can do it on your own. Let's go to verse 4 for beginning. The rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are justice. And then it says, a God of faithfulness and without iniquity, just and upright is he. Okay, we do not have a real, like a very close parallel between rock and, let's say, Yahweh or something. We have a mention of God here, but the way it is in the text, the rock, his ways, his work, is perfect, and all his ways are just. And knowing whose work is perfect and whose ways are just, we understand that the rock is actually God himself. Okay? Cool thing is, again, if you will look into either scroll or Hebrew text, usually in Hebrew text of the Bible, all letters are the same. And people say that they do not have a capital letters. It's actually vice versa. What I would suggest, think of especially those of you who type a lot, if you always press cap lock, and it's only capital letters. So you do not have a small ones. But even with that, let's say you have a rock. Okay, that's how it should be spelled. But in 32:4, even with this, the first letter, tzade, is actually, so let me try to, it's a little bit bigger. Seriously, it is a little bit bigger. Those who want to have real fun, after Bible study, we can go to my office and I will show you in the Hebrew text. Just a little bit. So probably it was some kind of an attempt of scribes to indicate that it's not just a rock. It's actually the one, that the one that we try to be very careful with calling his name in vain. That's the one whose work is perfect, and as it says here, whose ways are just. For a parallel text, let us jump for a second into Psalms 19. Psalm 19, verses 7 through 11. It doesn't talk about the rock, but what it says is that also there are attributes or there are gifts that Lord provide. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are all right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true, and the righteous altogether. More to be desired as the any of gold, even much of the fine gold, sweeter than the honey, are dipping from the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned, in keeping them there is a great reward. So it is Lord himself and the things that he, or gifts that he provides. One of them is the law. And again, not law in the sense of more like a strict judicial law. If you broke this commandment, that's your punishment. If you drive too fast, you'll have $700 fine. Okay, that's not the point. But the idea behind the word law is more, actually, we talked about that. It's more about a teaching. Okay, so that's how it's an instruction of how to live righteous in the sight of the Lord. Okay? Now, let us go further. So Abraham and as a father and Sarah as a mother, and this has an important parallel in Pauline letters. Let us jump for a second into Galatians 4. Because as you all know, Abraham had, technically he had one wife, Sarah. But she, oh wow, that's fun. But she acquired a maid from their travel into Egyptian territory, and her name was Hagar. And then Sarah had a brilliant idea. Since I cannot, conceive and deliver, maybe you can do something with my maid, and I will get child through her. And Abraham agreed, and it's very interesting, when you read the Hebrew text, it's very plain. It says, Abraham went into her. No love, no connection, nothing. Okay, he just did his, male duty. That's it. But what happened is, they didn't follow up on what should have been done. What should have been done is when she would deliver, she would give birth to, the knees of Sarah, and that child would be received by Sarah, and maybe they would be able to take it as a promised child. Instead of that, she kept it to herself, so we know the story with Ishmael, and when Sarah finally, by the miracle of God, conceived and delivered, there were some problems between Ishmael on one hand and Isaac on the other hand. We know the story, okay? And based on that, and I believe on the text which is in Isaiah, I think Paul really heavily depends his theology on Isaiah block from 40 to, or from 48 to roughly 55, 56, where the theme of righteousness is discussed heavily. So in chapter 4 in Galatians, tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do not listen to the law. Okay, have you not read Torah? Okay, 5 books of Moses. For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a slave woman and one by the free. And the son of the slave was born according to the flesh, and the son of the free woman was born according to the promise. Now this may be interpreted allegorically. These women are 2 covenants, one from the mountain Sinai and bearing children for slavery, and this is Hagar, and now the Hagar of Mountain Sinai is Arabia, so she corresponds to the present Jerusalem, and so on and so forth. So my point is, Paul did not invent it, okay? Paul did not create this idea. This idea is based on Isaiah 51, where it says, remember Abraham and Sarah. You are Israelites, you are not the descendant of Ishmael, okay? You are within this line, within this lineage in the family, and it is important. And this lineage is not only by blood, it's also by promise and connection by faith. And we actually talked about that a little bit on in our last lesson when we talked about Isaiah 56, where many people from other nations will join the Zion and worship, will join the family, and they are looking for that. Okay, so let us go back to Isaiah 51. Verse so the end of verse 2, he says that he was the one that I called him, and I might bless him and multiply him. Okay, I'm not going to comment on that really extensively. It's kind of relatively obvious. In Genesis 12 and 15, we have like at least 2 places where God says that I will multiply you. Okay, and by this time, he is multiplied. But the thing is, it is important to remember that this reminder about multiplication of son of Abraham is given in the context of promised exile, or promise of exit from exile. So even though you are going through exile, even though you will go through terrible time, regardless of that, I will make sure that you will be multiplied. You will have continual, descendants. And I think it is an important lesson for us as a church. Sometimes we look and it's like, oh, it's all terrible. Church is dying. Okay. Small spoiler alert for those of you who will listen to the sermon. Jesus says, I will build the church, not church will build itself. Okay? If we really believe Jesus as we confess in the creed, he is sitting at the right hand of the Father, basically runs the world. If he is building the church, he can build it forever. He can do whatever he wants. He is pretty capable to complete the task. It's not up to us. We need to participate. We need to do our part. That's a different story. But he is the one who does it, actually. So we have a great promise that it will be completed. Verse 3, for the Lord comforts Zion. He comforts all her waste places. Okay? Two things. One more thing. One more time we are reminded we are not in exile period yet in the sense of time. Isaiah lived about 150 years before exile. But he tells them, if you're going to continue the way of you carry on in your relationship with God, you will end up in exile. But even if Zion will have waste lands, it will be transformed into, let's see second part of verse 3. He will make it in her wilderness like Eden, her deserts like garden of the Lord. Okay, and he refers back to Genesis 2. We all know that stuff. Let's jump there for a second and see this beautiful passage where God tells us how it looked like. So in Genesis 2, starting with verse 8, and the Lord planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put a man from whom he formed, and out of the ground the Lord made to spring up every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for the food. And the tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the river flowed out of the garden and watered the garden, and there it divided and became 4 rivers, and so on and so forth. So we have Eden, we have garden, then we have 4 lands down there. So the garden was not only planted and beautiful, it was supplied by water. Okay, that's important. Okay, so it's not only like we have here lots of sun and yellow grass, but it's like we have sun there, but we have also provision of water to make sure the continual growth. Okay, so when we go back to Isaiah, we need to keep this in mind, that even this wonderful territory that used to be a garden, used to be a kind of Eden-like territory where Zion was, Israelite, when they were swept into exile. Now it is wilderness. God is capable of restoring it, start over and turning it into the beautiful garden. Actually, that's what happened. When we read the stories of Israel, when they came back to the land, it was looked like wilderness, but they turned it into something much more beautiful. And it is also interesting to see how territory of Israel changed since 1948. When Israel as a country was formed nowadays, yes, in the middle of surrounding deserts, it looks like garden. I mean, they are very careful how to use water. They are very careful how to use their limited resources, but it looks beautiful. It looks beautiful. People base their action. When people base their action on Scripture, it usually is blessed. Okay, now let's go to the verse 4. Give attention to me, my people. Give ear to me, my nation. Okay, this is again this wonderful word, the law. Okay, will go out from me. And I showed last time the third volume of commentary on Isaiah by one of our professors, Reed Lessing. When he comments on this passage, he even doesn't write the law. He substituted, and I think it's right, for the teaching will go out of me, because that Torah term, which is so scary to Christians sometimes, that's a better translation, the teaching. It is a teaching how we can be in a proper relationship with God. Okay? But this actually picks up on chapter 2 of what was promised in the very beginning of Isaiah. Let's jump there for a second. In chapter 2, and that's an important verse that you might want to memorize, verse 3. Where many people say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. So, chapter 2, verse 3. Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his path. For out of Zion shall go the law. The teaching, okay? It's not the law that judges you. It is actually the word of God that teaches you. But along with that, for the word of the Lord, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And I think it is important for us to take a notice on that this is from Zion, and since we are in Zion Lutheran Church, okay, maybe we need to be filled more with teaching of the Lord and then share it with other people who are around us. Okay? So let's take it more in the evangelistic or outreach context and apply it in our lives. Verse 5. And the second part of verse 4. So the law will go out of me, and I will set my justice for the light to the people. Okay? So again, there is another pair. There is a law and my justice. And the word for justice here is more like my judgments. But judgments in the Bible does not necessarily means, or does not whatsoever, not necessarily, does not mean being judgmental. Judgments means to more like an evaluation, okay? So when in the creation story, let's go from the very beginning. It says that and the Lord God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And then the God saw that the light was good, so be it. Okay. So that phrase that the God said that the light was good, that's a judgment. Okay? Because you passing judgment, is it good or bad? So when we see Lord's judgments, it's not necessarily that we will be accused. It means that we will be given a proper, whatever we deserve, evaluation. Okay? And we evaluate ourselves, we evaluate people, and that's what Jesus tells us, that you will recognize them by their deeds. It's not necessarily that we need to tell that all of them are bad. The point is, you see how a person lives. It is very interesting that modern in modern philosophy or studies of educational studies, people love to call attention to guys like French, enlightened French philosophers. But many of them had, and how they would tell how kids should be educated and so on and so forth. But many of these guys had ruined families, or we would call dysfunctional families, bad relationship with their spouses, multiple spouses, would not carry on education of their own kids, and yet their example is taken out and brought up into some kind of high esteem. Okay, instead of looking around for people who have, as we have in Scripture, how husband of one wife, and they have kids, and their kids are obedient and well behaved and good citizens in the country. I would prefer to take an advice from that kind of person. Just makes more sense to me. Verse 5. My righteousness draws near. Sorry. Go back to end of verse 4. because there is an important phrase. And so these judgments, these statements are given as a light to the people. Doesn't ring the bell? Every communion worship service, after communion, we sing the song of a guy named Simeon. Luke, it is taken from Gospel of Luke chapter 2, and we can either you know it by heart, probably by singing so many times, but just in case, let us go there and see. Lord, now you're letting your servant depart in peace, according to your word. Okay, what's that? For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, that you have prepared in the presence of all people. Then what's the next phrase? A light to the revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of thy people Israel. Okay? So when we see this, when we see those statements applied in our life or in the life of our brothers and sisters, it is actually a light, because that's how people notice us, that we are a little bit different from everybody else. And then they come and says, I want to live like you. I don't like that. I want to live like you. How do you do that? How do you go through struggles? How do you go through hard times? How do you go through the moment when you lost your job? I mean, why? What's so different? And that's what we can call an evangelism. So, verse 5, finally. So my righteousness draws near, and my salvation has gone out, and my arms will judge the people. Again, my arms will pass a judgment about people, and some will deserve judgment in the sense of accusation. Some will deserve a praise. Okay? And but verse 6, lift up your eyes to heaven and look at the earth beneath. Okay? One more time. This first part of verse 6 is actually kind of picks up on that theme. We have something above the surface and we have something below the surface. So wherever you look, it's kind of like it's covering all area which is occupied by people, below the heavens and even beneath the earth, everywhere. So wherever you look, what you see is those boundaries are not forever. The heavens will vanish like a smoke, and it's kind of like, when you look outside the window right now, it's almost very close, fulfillment of that prediction. It's not vanishing by smoke, but we cannot see heavens because of smoke. Okay? And the earth will wear like a garment. But the cool thing is, regardless of what we see in our natural environment, my salvation will be forever, and my righteousness will never be dismayed. Okay, so his promises, his true gifts to humanity and to cosmos, I would say, will stay forever. Okay? We're almost done. Questions or comments?